It's strange how things work out sometimes. If I were picking when to review these films, then every piece of common sense says I should review How the Grinch Stole Christmas in December, not January, when everyone is probably sick of Christmas movies and reference. Still, that's the beauty of a random drawing, I guess. The original story, published in 1957, was turned into an animated film in 1966 and a CGI movie in 2018. But it's the year 2000 live-action release that's the subject of today's review. Here we are with another film I haven't seen, mostly. I've seen bits of it, but not all the way through, and the main reasons for that are A, I know the story, and although my reading of it a few years back was fun to do, I'm not enamoured with it. B, I'm not a fan of the style and the look of the film. Jim Carrey seems like perfect casting, but the realistic look of this film is a little off-putting to me, kind of like the reaction to the live-action Cats movie, or the first design of Sonic the Hedgehog in his movie, which also stars Jim Carrey. How about that for a segue? Well, let's get to it then. Here's my review of How the Grinch Stole Christmas. In the town of Whoville, it's nearly Christmas, and the whole town is buzzing, making sure they've bought everything and literally counting down the minutes to the big day. Up on Mount Crumpet, overlooking the town, is the Grinch, a being who lives alone and hates Christmas. After a couple of teenagers lock on his door and antagonize him, he sets down to the town to cause problems. Whilst in disguise, he sabotages bikes, swaps gifts around, and gives out junk mail to everyone. He's discovered, though, by Cindy Lou, a small girl who's initially scared by the Grinch into the sorting machine. Before she's killed, though, the Grinch saves her, and just to stay mean, wraps her up in gift wrap. Cindy becomes intrigued by the Grinch on why he is the way he is, partly because the whole town is scared of him, and partly because she's questioning the whole reason behind Christmas. Her research by means of asking Whoville residents about the Grinch has her discover that he has always disliked it, even as a small child, until he developed a crush on schoolmate Martha. He made her a present, but Augustus, who also liked Martha, teased the Grinch for having a beard at age 8. The Grinch decided to shave it off, but did such a bad job that he's laughed at by everyone. He smashes the gift he made for Martha, destroys the Christmas tree, and runs away to the mountains where he resides today. Cindy feels sorry for the Grinch, and so when the town asks for nominations for the Cheermeister, she nominates the Grinch. The mayor, a grown-up Augustus, is reluctant but is talked into it by the town on the agreement that if the Grinch doesn't show up, he will be declared Cheermeister. Cindy travels up to Mount Crumpet, but this time is no longer scared of the Grinch when he tries to scare her away. He seems uninterested until he learns that he gets an award, the mayor hates the idea, and that Martha will be there. The Grinch eventually arrives and is forced to partake in all the Cheermeister activities, which he hates at first, but seems to enjoy by the end. That is right up until Mayor Augustus gives the Grinch a set of clippers as a gift and proposes to Martha right in front of him. The Grinch reacts by ranting about the gifts all ending up dumped by his house and the fact that Christmas is a sham. He then sets fire to the town Christmas tree and goes on a rampage. This doesn't deter the Whos as they set up a backup tree as the Grinch leaves. The Grinch then decides he's going to steal Christmas from Whoville, and with the help of his dog Max, he steals the presents, trees, decorations and food, and is about to dump it all off the top of the mountain until he hears singing from Whoville. Whoville has woken up to everything being stolen, and the mayor is quick to blame Cindy for the Grinch stealing it, but Cindy's dad, Lou, stands up for her and declares that all he needs for Christmas is his family. The town agrees and starts to sing together. The Grinch, puzzled by the upbeat attitude, has the realization about the spirit of Christmas and starts to feel emotions for the first time in years. He and Cindy, who snuck off to see the Grinch as no one should be alone on Christmas, save the sleigh full of all the Christmas stuff and sleigh back down to Whoville to give it all back. The mayor orders the police to arrest the Grinch, but as the Grinch goes to hand himself in and even apologize, the police decide to let him off in the spirit of Christmas. Martha then turns down Augustus and declares her heart belongs to the Grinch. Whoville celebrates as the Grinch joins in the Christmas festivities by carving the roast beast. I had a lot of thoughts after watching this one, and I wasn't sure where to begin. I normally start with the plot, so let's go there. I like the adaptation of the story, honestly. It fleshes it out and gives a reason for the Grinch to be as he is, and his redemption at the end seems much more genuine as a result. I especially like the whole dimension of the Grinch being in love with Martha. Why did you say that name? The narrator, who I will come back to later, tells the story word for word throughout the film, and the long gaps in between fill out why things are the way they are. It's a really good way of adapting a book into a movie, and it all makes perfect sense, save for one line. When the narrator says, "No one quite knows the reason," this is then contradicted by Cindy Lou finding out from several people why the Grinch hates Christmas. It's a sticking point for me because you could argue that no one hears the narrator until the Grinch himself talks to him later on. Just on that, I would have liked to have seen more interactions between the Grinch and the narrator, much like the film Stranger Than Fiction, one of the few Will Ferrell films I actually like. The only thing I will say about this adaptation is I think there's too much screen time for the titular character, the Grinch. Jim Carrey does a great job bringing him to life, giving him a lot of character, but I think a less is more mentality would have A, cut down the runtime, and B, meant that we aren't overly saturated with the over-the-top Grinch. It may just be my preference on this one, but I think we see too much Jim Carrey doing what he does well, and there's a lot more to this movie than that. It also would have meant less scenes for Carrey, and maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't have had such an issue with the makeup and prosthetics. More on that later too. Generally though, there's nothing wrong with any of the acting here. Augustus comes across as a jerk, Martha is the girl still pining over the Grinch, and Lou is the dad who wants to toe the line about the Grinch, but never sells his kids out and even stands up for Cindy at the end. Cindy, as a secondary focus, as the person who interacts with the Grinch the most, is excellent here too. She's played by Taylor Momsen, who hasn't done much acting-wise since, but has gone on to a music career. I do wonder how many times Jim Carrey made her laugh though when she wasn't supposed to. Anthony Hopkins' unmistakable voice as the narrator is such a good fit. He has a wonderful voice I could only dream of. It is quite amusing thinking of Hannibal Lecter reading The Grinch though.
Way up in the mountains, in the high range of Pontoos, lay the small town of Whoville, the home of the Whos.
Visually, I have mixed feelings. I read somewhere that Tim Burton was considered to direct the film, and although he has no involvement, it feels like it's very Burton-esque. The only thing missing is Helena Bonham Carter and Johnny Depp, although having Johnny Depp in this film would have ruined it completely. F*** that guy. It's also really dark for a town about to celebrate Christmas. The Grinch's lair being dark and even Mount Crumpet makes sense, but Whoville itself is supposed to be the opposite, and yet it always seems dark and gloomy despite the abundance of lights on display. The Whoville residents look very much like their book counterparts, and I like the explanation that you grow into your nose, hence why Cindy doesn't have a nose like everyone else. The Grinch himself looks amazing, and I love the fact they use the same makeup and costume for the young version of the Grinch as the old. It's really adaptable in that way. In fact, How the Grinch Stole Christmas won an Oscar for Best Makeup, as well as nominations for Best Art Direction and Best Costume. I mentioned earlier that Carrey didn't get on with the makeup. Stories say he kicked a hole in his trailer in anger at having to spend 2.5 hours at a time getting the makeup on. His anger towards makeup artist Kazuhiro in particular meant he was in a foul mood most of the time. He calmed down eventually, but Carrey spending 92 days in the costume with 2.5 hours at a time in makeup meant that his patience was well and truly tested. It also harkens back to my less is more mentality I mentioned earlier. Musically, there are just 3 vocal tracks, and they're okay. Nothing special, pretty forgettable. The only one I really remember is The Grinch's theme, which was originally done in the first TV movie. I also think it was done better there, if I'm being honest. I tell you what did surprise me, though, the references for adults. Between the implied infidelity when the storks deliver baby Whos, the swingers party where everyone drops their keys into a bowl, and so I'm told, and the Grinch landing face first in Martha's cleavage, there's quite a few things that aren't exactly kid-friendly. Funny for me, certainly. As was the random Ron Howard impression by the Grinch when trying to train Match to be a reindeer. Apparently this was ad-libbed, but Howard loved it so much that it stayed in. How the Grinch Stole Christmas is an enjoyable adaptation of the original book. I think it captures the spirit of the story and expands on the backstory very well. I think it went a little bit over the top with Jim Carrey's zaniness, and I'm not a fan with some of the visuals, but overall, I like this one, and I'll probably watch it again, but probably at a more seasonable time of the year. Next up for the Film Review Open Challenge is Taxi Driver. In the meantime, though, thank you very much for watching.